All right, let's get going. So we're joined today by executives of 4 innovators in the global student mobility space. And all these folks compete in the higher ed sector, which is the largest and probably most valuable sector within global student mobility. And the companies are varying in size, sort of maturity level, but they're all involved in different ways in the digital disruption that's taking place in the space. So it's a sector that obviously has been impacted by the pandemic, and we want to talk today about what that impact has been and hopefully the rebound that's coming. But we also wanted to overlay a couple of other factors in here, which are, it is a sector, again, there's a longer wave impact of digital disruption in the space, and it's also a sector that's getting buffeted by a lot of geopolitical and regulatory changes all the time. So that mix of pandemic and those 2 other forces makes for some pretty interesting dynamics. So we want to talk first and foremost about kind of the size, nature, trajectory of the markets, where they're at, the impact of the pandemic. We want the group to give a little bit of an overview of their business models and the plays that they're trying to carve out in the space. It's not an advertisement. It's literally to give a sense of the sort of the diversity and complexity of different models that are in the space. So no advertising. And finally, we want to then talk about the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. So how is the market likely to evolve? So if we can walk out of the session with those 3 things accomplished, we will have succeeded. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we wanted to start, Edwin, with you. And Edwin works with Studyportals and CEO, doesn't work with it, you are the CEO of the company. And Studyportals has done does a lot of data collection and has a really good finger on the pulse of the market broadly. So Edwin, would love it if you could just sort of give your overview of the size and nature and trajectory of the market.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for having me on this distinguished panel. So the overall market of international higher education students is, according to UNESCO, about 6 million mobile students. They represent about, according to our estimate, about $300 billion of spending. It's been a market that has been growing nicely, about 7-8% year on year, pretty consistently. I think tripled the last 20 years. So it's 6 million, but it's still the privileged few. It's the privileged few of the privileged few, because in the world there are about 230 million students that are enrolled at a university, so including the domestic students. So it's only 3% of that. And beyond those 230 million, there's still about 1 billion people out there that have a need for higher education, but currently no access. Traditionally, if we look at the destinations of these 6 million international students, they've gone to the big 4 or the big 5 Anglophone destinations, so the US, the UK, very fast growing Canada, and always have been a powerhouse Australia, and New Zealand is the kind of number 5. But that destination landscape is changing rapidly. So if we, for instance, look at continental Europe, when Studyportals started, that's about 11 years ago, there were 500 master's programs taught in English. Now, a little bit more than 10 years later, 10,000 master's programs taught in English. Asia, they've gone through that growth of, let's say, from 0 to 10,000 in only 3 years' time. So really also a new destination coming to the market. In terms of source of those students, the story is complex. Obviously, China and India are 2 really big source markets. Also the EU, if you take it as a region, is a big source market, and what we see is the sources of students are becoming increasingly diverse. Africa coming to the scene, Latin America, and other countries in Asia. So that's kind of from a source market perspective. Would you want me to cover the pandemic as well, Tom? Or?
Yeah, please.
So I think what we've seen is students are, and the student demand for international education is extremely resilient. So just like the stock market, somewhere in March 2020, the demand for students studying abroad on Studyportals dropped pretty quickly. I think we lost about 40% of demand in 1 week. However, it only took 7-8 weeks for that to recover. So pretty quickly, even though borders were still closed, students were looking again for their opportunities, for making their education dreams come true. If we look at enrollment, so commencements, new students going abroad, in 2020, according to our estimates, there's about 22% less enrollment, so 78% of the enrollment compared to 2019. And of that 78% of enrollment or commencements that remained, 28% started online in their home country. Some countries were much more affected, like the US destination was quite heavily affected because of COVID, but also because of some other reasons in 2020. Some countries were really strict with border closure, just like, for instance, Australia, and still China today is pretty much still closed and in lockdown for many parts of the country. Other countries, like, for instance, continental Europe, where you have intra-European mobility, is quite a big part, where students don't need visas, and we had actually a summer where COVID was kind of okay for people to travel. The market has been growing in terms of enrollment from 2019 to 20 and into 2021. And certainly we can now see that we are on recovery, and I think that the underlying growth of the demand, so the, let's say, 8% compound annual growth that we've seen over the last 10 years, that underlying growth has kept on happening, and there's a lot of pent-up demand that is coming to the market to some extent in 2021, and certainly in 2020, 2022.
Terrific. So wonder if there are any comments or any color that others on the group want to add to that. Is what he's saying true?
Yeah, adding to what Edwin said, so being India as one of the biggest source for international students, we see that in pre-pandemic, it was around 500,000 students went to study abroad. In 2020, it was dropped drastically, but in 2021, around 700,000 students went to study abroad. And now Times Education is saying around 1.5 million students would be going to study abroad in 2020, by end of 2023. So not only that, when pandemic happened, a lot of traction we saw on the online platforms. So it's not necessarily the interest of the students dropped. It's because of the travel restrictions. Students started adopting hybrid model, like semester online and semester abroad and other stuff.
Terrific.
Yeah, just I'll add a small point here, Tom. I think 21, sort of the levels came back to 2019, just making a broad summary statement here. And we are into April of 22. I'll make a bold statement on this stage that 22 will set a new all-time high in international student mobility.
Do this.
So growth will be back.
For sure.
Okay. Terrific. All right, so let's turn and get these kind of snapshots of the businesses, and I particularly, again, want to focus around sort of the play that you're trying to carve out, the model. And I'd go in pointing out that one thing that's sort of interesting about the international student recruitment markets is that there are two segments, which most people know. There's an agent-facilitated segment that's roughly 2/3 of the market, and there's a direct model approach, which is about 1/3 of the market. And so
it depends a lot on which destination countries you consider.
Yeah.
Because I think if you look at the whole world, it's the other way around. It's predominantly direct.
It's predominantly direct.
Especially Southeast Asian countries are agent-based model, right, compared to the rest of the other countries.
There's some good, I think, iGraduate data on it that offers a global perspective on. So destination Europe, or origin Europe, origin Americas, it's much less agent-dominated than Asia, for instance.
Okay. So anyway, well, let's jump into the models. Sowmya, do you want to start?
Yeah. So Nestlings is was launched in February 2018. We are a digital marketplace for double-sided digital marketplace to connecting students to international universities abroad, and also giving them everything they need to pursue their higher education and career abroad, like financial aid, internship, and first-time jobs on one single platform. We had around 2.5% conversion last year, like 2021. We have 50,000 students on our platform, and we have 1,200 destination universities. And also, we recently signed up an exclusive deal with 200 plus universities, which is bringing 600,000 students on our platform by end of 2023. We are seeing, sudden increase on the online traction, on the traction from the online platform perspective. Maybe because of the pandemic, students were not able to reach out to, the middleman called agent. So our model is bypassing the face-to-face agent model, which is there currently on the Southeast Asian market.
Great. And it's you're very India-focused as a source country, right?
Yes. Right now, we are focused on India, being one of the top country to source international students.
Yeah. Okay. Manu?
ApplyBoard's a marketplace, so we have schools on one side of that, about 1,500, nearly approaching 2,000 schools. On the other side, we have agents, recruitment partners, which is a little different. We also do direct students as well, but we operate in a number of different countries in terms of source, and then obviously the big four, approaching 5 destination countries as well. But we pride ourselves on being a platform that basically connects recruitment partners with the platform, with all these different schools that are out there, and create that transparency and that liquidity in the market.
Terrific.
So Studyportals, I guess we're a little bit the dinosaur in the room. We're not that old, but we're started in 2009, been around for a while. I'm Dutch, I studied in Japan. Thanks to people like you, that was possible for me. That was a transformational experience, but I realized how hard it was to find options. So that's what Studyportals does. The first thing we really did was to build a platform that serves students best, to find and compare all their options of higher education. So we work for probably over 3,700, might be a little bit more today, universities in 116 countries. And we give students the option to find and compare them all and make an informed choice. Now that really worked well. We had in 2021, 52 million unique student users. 101 new users every single minute. So that's pretty cool. And then we monetize the platform through serving the institutions. And we help institutions to reach their strategic goals. These can be international growth, but they can also be increasing the diversity of the student population, something that we are particularly good at. Or the quality, retention, graduation rates of the students. And we work with institutions on the basis of results. We work for more than 1,000 institutions in that model. We're only scratching the surface.
Great.
Thanks, Edwin. Hi, I'm Vaibhav, founder of Leap. Leap is an international student mobility platform. I know we've heard the word platform and marketplace across. And of course, we are all sort of new age technology-enabled businesses. I think the one thing which is unique to us, or we like to believe it's very unique to us, is we truly sit at the intersection of edtech and fintech. I know this is largely an edtech audience, but when we started Leap, it was clear to me that one of the gaps in the market was somebody who could help the student literally from the first day they dreamed about going abroad till the point of successfully enrolling and settle down on a campus abroad. And in this entire journey, there are a whole bunch of needs. There are sort of test prep needs, there are advisory needs, And there is a whole bunch of financial product needs as well. There are credit needs. Obviously, most international students rely on financing to be able to move abroad. The things about how do I move money abroad, bank accounts, cards, student health insurance. And we just felt that a typical student who successfully moved abroad took these products and services from no less than 5, 6 different providers. For good or for bad, most of these solutions were siloed. Many of these solutions were analog in nature, so quite different to how a 20-something-year-old is living his or her life today. And we said all of that really needed to come on one common digital-first, high NPS, student-obsessed platform, and that's what Leap is. We've been building for a little over 2 years. Obviously, our first year of operation was COVID. It was an interesting year to be building a cross-border business. So in many ways, 21 was our first full year in operation. We helped 60,000 students to take at least one Leap offering and move abroad.
Terrific. Okay. So let's turn to now talking about the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. The first topic I wanted to focus on was just the issue of sort of geopolitical winds and regulatory, because those, again, this is an overlay on top of the pandemic that creates a lot of squirreliness in the market. So would love to hear from you, from all of you, just what your take is on sort of what role and impact geopolitics, regulatory environment play, and what kind of opportunities and challenges flow out of that. So, Sowmya, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, so regulatory changes need not to be always having a negative impact. There are a lot of times there is a positive impact, especially recently in India. Ministry of Education in India, they approved a policy to extend the project duration of the undergrad programs. So especially this is enabling all the students who are in the undergrad programs to opt for short-term skill development programs abroad. So essentially, it's like increasing the TAM. Earlier, maybe out of 10% of those students would have approached to study abroad, like, graduate programs. Now, all the 100% students get a chance to go abroad to do their skill development, like a short-term programs. Having said that, but they do have negative impacts especially in the pandemic due to the travel restrictions. Mm-hmm. But a lot of students overcome that by picking up a hybrid model of semester online and semester abroad. So we are seeing both of those happening during these days.
Yeah, so it's starting to open up additional market.
Yes, yeah, starting to open up the different market.
Terrific.
Yeah, and look, regulations are regulations. They will come and go, and the best that we can do is try and predict what they will be, but that's always going to be a fool's errand. I think one of the things that we can do as businesses is be relatively diversified, obviously, so that you're not dependent on specific markets. I think that definitely helps. But what I think you've seen, like, there's a couple of instances, right? So UK Roots, I think it is, and the Canada post-graduation program, that's also really helped. And those have been very deliberate regulatory government policy programs around getting all the way from education through to the job market as well, which is a big plus. So you've seen Biden, 8 weeks ago, make a fairly bold statement as well around what he intended to do with the US. So I think you see a lot of these things happening, and it's on us to make the most of those. But you definitely see that there's a positive, I think, an overall positive move by governments in terms of this.
They're viewing it as an economic development engine for the country, right?
They really are. And I think more and more, the more that we can help tell that story, that this is about benefiting future countries and even host countries as well, is a really positive way for us to go.
Terrific.
I think in this context, it's a nice statistic. In 2030, only 8% of the STEM graduates will graduate in the Americas and only 4% in Europe. Right? So the rest will, obviously, demographically, most of the young people are being born in Africa. Mm-hmm. That's the only continent actually growing, and the rest is all declining. So the regulation will need to adapt to be able to attract the talent that's needed for some of the developed countries to stay developed countries. And maybe in this context, also because I'm from Europe, good to mention the situation in Ukraine. That can have an impact too. So we already see 700% growth in demand of students from the Ukraine looking for their options elsewhere. In the Donetsk Oblast, that's the eastern part, where the most heavy fighting is going on, it's 1600% growth on the Studyportals platform. In Russia, there's a decline. In general, in the whole Europe, there's now a decline. People are simply less have the freedom to think about education because everything that's happening. Now, if the situation is contained in the way it is right now, I think this will not have a very disruptive impact, although we do see that the resulting refugee flow is affecting mostly the continental European universities that are, by the way, very supportive, or actually, I think, across the Western world, very supportive in supporting these refugees. But it will put a strain on the capacity of the institutions. If the situation is not contained, yeah, well, what is going to happen to globalization and international mobility? That can obviously have a very significant impact on the short term.
Right.
Can I just dive in on this? Because I think Edwin
crossed.
raises a really interesting point, right, around these population declines that you're seeing and just the economic pressure that you're going to see in places like Europe and things like that over the coming 10, 20 years. And I think there's going to be a natural reckoning that governments are going to have to make around importing this talent and saying, like, okay, how do we bring in not just technology transfer, but it's actually human capital as well. Otherwise, there's this long-term decline, essentially, of Europe that's in play, which is really unfortunate. And you can start to see that governments are starting to wrestle with this now. But I think what you will see is a more formalization of that kind of approach over the next few years as they come to realize, like, no, this GDP just is not going to keep growing up, and it's part of our job to enable countries to continue to grow and create that wealth for themselves.
Terrific.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Tom. That's the, I almost look at international student mobility as a talent matching problem at a global scale. And fundamentally, that's what this space is about. That's how it'll shape out, or that's how it's happened over the last many decades. It'll only get accelerated with the use of more and more technology, with globalization. I know there are questions right now on that, but the reality is there's a part of our world where there are, hungry 20-year-olds and sort of, desperate to succeed, and there are hundreds of millions of them. Yeah. And there is a part of our world which really has the industries, is sort of, definitely further up in the development cycle, but need that talent. Edwin shared a stat about STEM graduates. Like today in US schools, in the top 100 schools, if you look at the engineering disciplines, the STEM disciplines, 80% plus of those students are international students. The reality is, we can all have a viewpoint on this, but the reality today on the ground is a lot of the STEM skill shortage in the US, and again, depends on what you read, whether it's 2 million or 5 million, but it's in the few million students or in the few million sort of potential employees. It's being met through international sort of talent import. Yeah. And really that's how I like to look at it. So till the world wants to grow, it'll always want talented people. And there is a skew in talent today in the world. And, I almost feel like, all of us are in some ways helping to solve for that matching problem.
Yeah. That statistic was true back in the 1980s in the US as well, in terms of most students in master's programs were international students. So,
but to this point around talent matching that Vaibhav rightly raises, right? This is why platforms and software will work in this.
Yeah.
There is no more effective way of matching demand and supply than through a platform. You can see it in Wayfair, where I used to work. You can see it in Uber when you go and get your cars. Yeah. That is the way that this will work, and that's why this is such a powerful place to be.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue to talking about digital transformation and that transition. So any other points around that are worth, from your perspective, raising?
I mean, the only thing that I will say is that I struggle to see an industry, and I've really given it a lot of thought, where platforms are not basically becoming the dominant opportunity in this. maybe vinyl records, which are kind of taking off. But beyond that, like I have not seen anything else. Everything else you can see, you are moving to marketplaces that are platform supported. And I don't think this industry is any different. I think it's just been a little slower.
Yep.
And it's been a little slower for a bunch of cultural and historic reasons, but it's also an extremely complicated problem that all four of us are trying to solve here. And you know, the market is more than big enough, as Edwin kind of rightly said at the beginning of this, right? In terms of like, how big is the market today? And then you've got this huge untapped potential that sits underneath it. There's plenty for us to go around and help.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I think all these different platforms in their own way will help solve in these different niches.
Vaibhav, you and I were talking yesterday about your view on the platform and sort of, you know, you're essentially creating, like one of the leading players, IDP, you're creating like an IDP 3.0. You want to add to those comments at all?
Yeah, I can see Warwick smiling in
Warwick's
the audience.
listening.
Yeah, the way, you know, just broadly, Tom, the way we always think about technology in international student mobility is there are like 2 or 3 core tenets. One is just in the experience of being able to move abroad. Like, you know, this is a 6, 9, 12-month journey, many milestones. Just, you know, it's clearly the most important decision the student, the family is going to take in many ways. In Tier 3 India, the whole literally community gets involved in sending a student abroad. So it's a huge decision.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things which obviously digital and technology does is really improve that experience in matchmaking, improve that experience in, you know, in transparency, in just where you are in that journey. So there's this whole element of experience which I think really needs to be solved for and which technology and digitization will lead. The second, you know, I think, at least I would like to believe for me personally, more critical part of technology and data science is just the complexity of matching now. You know, 20 years ago, like international student mobility has always been happening, but the choices were far more limited, right? You know, you literally went to 3 or 4 countries. You literally went to a couple of 100 schools. Each of those schools offered, you know, a few dozen programs. Compare that with today. You know, when students are going to many more countries, there are, you know, thousands of colleges which are now expecting, you know, accepting international students. There is literally a new specialization being born every week, and students want to pursue all those new age skills. So the ability to sort of match a student's profile, match a student's interests, match a student's ambition with these, you know, literally tens of thousands of opportunities, that is no longer humanly possible through an experienced counselor, right? Like when there were only so many choices, you could always, almost through experience, say, hey, I think do this and do that. But now it's impossible, right? And the only way to solve it is through data. And I think that's another aspect of, you know, of technology, which I think will really impact our segment. And then finally, you know, as 2 points on the demand side, so I'll add a point on the supply side as well. I think even schools, their ability to sort of engage, interact with their potential students, that is going to be hugely enabled by technology. Like, you know, back in the day, obviously, you know, these large physical education fairs, personally, my view is I think they have already started coming back and they will come back. But the reality then is, like, you know, I think, and this has been accelerated through COVID, is you don't need to only potentially speak to your students twice a year when you can get on a plane and come to Mumbai. You could do it now on a digital platform, dare I say, weekly, right? And that then just helps make better connections, helps make the right choices, and then obviously leads to better outcomes, right? So I think those are the 3 facets which I strongly believe technology is changing.
One thing that Edwin, you and I were talking about is just with such an explosion of different would-be platforms and, you know, trying to drive on this journey to creating liquid marketplaces, universities are, you know, they have limited budgets. They've got to make a choice about, which channel partners they want to work with. They don't have huge teams and unlimited budgets. So that's kind of a friction point in this process. Do you have any observations on that, Edwin?
Yeah, I think so. So universities, we sometimes see them struggling. It can be overwhelming, the amount of new entrants and players that are out there in the market, and often at face value, difficult for them to compare and know what's different, and know which one's really big and which one's maybe not that big. So yeah, we see universities struggling with that. Luckily, there are some players that provide third-party independent information, for instance, on user numbers. There are resources like SimilarWeb or Alexa.com that can be used for that. Obviously, you can talk to colleagues in the market using the platform as if you are a student. I think is also something we always recommend to get to understand the differences. But there's a lot of players, due to also kind of as a side benefit to the success of some of the people in the room here. It can be overwhelming for institutions. Luckily, I think nobody or almost nobody has like, oh, you have to work with us and nobody else. So I think it's healthy for many institutions to work with multiple players, particularly to cover the different segments of students. You talked about it a little bit. You have the students that like to be counseled and like a counselor or an agent to process their application, and then there's the students who prefer to go direct.
Yeah.
It's important, I think, to be strong on both those segments.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not an easy job for marketeers, international marketeers at universities.
Sowmya, just one of the things that we were talking about is you've had to move a lot of boulders in trying to build your offering, and this whole point about sort of trust and liquidity in the market and knowing what you're getting, like that was a big problem for you to solve for. How did you go about it?
Yeah, so I think trust is the biggest challenge here, given that there are a lot of multiple layers of agents between students and the universities. So it's a trust from the university end, and it's a trust from the student end. So that's why we were trying to build a two-sided marketplace where we connect students directly to the university, and we developed an international common app. So the common app is working, fantastic. But when student comes to the acceptance level, where they need to accept the offer from the university, that's where we see the challenge, because they don't trust the platform. So there is a lot going on because there's a lot of scam around, and they don't want to, submit their credentials. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to collaborate more with the source universities. So we are building an advanced collaborations with the source universities so that everything is channelized directly from the source universities to the destination universities, so that in between the students gets trust, because this is suggested by our own university, which is so earlier. I think there are a lot of institutions, source institutions, which has exchange programs. So they do have individual universities, partner to work especially for their students for the exchange programs. But what we are talking here is not just exchange programs is really complicated, when it comes to digital disruptor like us, because we need to match each and every program. We need a lot of data. Data needs to mature. Then we need to start matching the programs. So till we get there, the model of working with the source universities with an advanced collaboration is what we are trying to do. So we are also bringing some kind of a community, interactions between the students, between the university and the students. Obviously, destination institutions do not want to, build up their message list and a lot of students reaching out to them. But we are getting there. So it's like Manu said, it is slow, but we are definitely getting there.
Okay.
Can I maybe make a point on this? Because I think you've heard two words which I think are absolutely critical and a byproduct of the digital work that we do, which is trust and transparency.
Yeah.
So I'll give you two examples of this, right, which I think this is just the beginning. So as an example, we have something called Apply Proof, where the student can take a letter, at the customs agent, and when the person comes into the country, they know it's guaranteed from the university. So you have just eliminated that fraud. That's just one example. There's going to be so much more innovation that comes from this. On the other side, when it comes to schools as an example, and Edwin, what you were saying, we have something now where the schools can see how they are doing in terms of their admissions relative to their peer group. Something that, again, didn't used to exist before, and that's just, public data that we are packaging for them and making very accessible in a way that allows them to compare and contrast. Well, those are just two innovations. How many innovations do you think are going to happen over the next 5 years, 10 years, that are based around these two pillars of trust and transparency? Mm-hmm. And you can only do that when it comes to platforms and you put the student at the center of that process.
Terrific. We have just under 5 minutes left, so I wanted to just ask if there are any other trends or opportunities, challenges that we haven't hit on that really stand out for each of you. Maybe we'll start.
What I'm really excited about, at least for us, is that we're going to make that step towards graduation and employment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've done a lot of work for a long time to make sure we match the student to the program they're most likely to enroll. But now we're taking that towards the program they're actually most likely to graduate and then find a job that they want. So rather than starting with what would you like to study, or starting from the student side with what would you like to become, right. Mm-hmm. We also work already with tech employers to help them attract those students into jobs, kind of fish in front of the net in the global war for talent, and also to have the analytics to know which students are graduating where from which universities, with which critical skills that they need and are scarce for their company, so that they know with which university they need to build partnerships and recruit students from. Mm-hmm. So that's one piece, the employment piece. The other piece, that goes back to my earlier statement about the size of the market. So the 6 million students that we're all trying to serve here, these are the privileged few of the privileged few. Yeah. There's the pyramid of all students, about 230 million, and then there's 1 billion students out there that have a need for higher education, currently no access. So we started a global access initiative together with UNESCO and Council of Europe to help those students to find what we call ultra-accessible higher education options that are low cost or no cost, mm-hmm. And typically very flexible, and also scholarship and funding. That, of course, needs a completely different model because mm-hmm. cost per enrollment needs to be, less than $100. But yeah, super excited to bring more access across the world.
Vaibhav, do you have one that stands out?
Yeah, no, I think we've all spoken about how we're just at the tip of the iceberg of this entire opportunity, and I think the way we like to work, and as a young, fast-growing company, I think there are many. Every single day we've got 1,000 challenges to solve. But the reality is the opportunity which this entire space represents, I strongly believe is the opportunity of human aspiration, of a 20-something-year-old's aspiration to really transform his or her life. And when you're serving and when you're working towards that goal, the challenges sort of fade away.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. Manu, do you have any parting thoughts?
I mean, ApplyBoard will help 60,000 people, but it's not 60,000 people, it's 60,000 families. And I think sometimes we forget that it's not just the student, it's these families, and then their generations and their generations after them as well. And to me, that makes me really proud that everyone here is doing that, and that is going to continue to expand over the coming years. And honestly, I think the amount of well-being, of wealth that we are going to collectively unlock, and happiness and fulfillment is going to be incredible. And I think the fact that there's a few people here on the stage today, and all of you who are trying to do that as well, is something to behold.
Terrific. Sowmya, any parting thoughts?
So what I can say is, like adding to what Edwin said, so there are a lot of trends. What we are seeing at Nestlings is for the short-term programs, which is short-term programs is basically not supposed to be an honors programs. it's a combination of the training and the project, which we are looking at, which we are, talking to a couple of corporates in Silicon Valley, and we are really excited about it. And we are also talking to UCLA and ASU to create such programs for our students. We are looking around 250,000 students by end of 2023 to opt for such programs. So we are really excited about that. Yeah.
Excellent. We're exactly at 0, 0, 0.
I think it's going to stay that for like at least an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
We can
There we go. So thank you. Appreciate it.